Hello everyone, it's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. About 2 years ago, so it was like 2 years ago, I made this video called Estimating Range on the Aptera. And I think it's time that we need to visit this again for a couple of reasons. So this is a spreadsheet. It was created by Oopsie or Curtis. He's one of our members here. And he made this really cool spreadsheet on Google Sheets. And I will put a link to it below. And if you want to play around with the numbers yourself, what you're going to want to do is open this up, go to File, and say Make a Copy. And then make a copy for your own account, and then you can play with all the numbers yourself. When you click the link that I give you in the description, it's going to be view only. You can't change any of the numbers, but it's fun to play around with. Okay, so the reason that I want to revisit this is some people that don't really have a strong grasp of physics were doubting the engineering and the physics of actual engineers. And Warren Redlick had this video on January 13th about can Aptera survive, and he's quoting his Twitter or X post where he has some pretty inaccurate assumptions. Okay, so here we go. He's just basically saying that the efficiency numbers that Aptera is putting out are completely bogus, can't be true. And actually, Drew, a couple of days ago, did a video about is Aptera efficiencies too good to be true? And he did a great job. And you should watch his video. He explains it very well. In this video, I want to just kind of get more into the nuts and bolts of it and get into the physics. So how is efficiency determined? There's basically three things that determine the efficiency of a vehicle. There's two forces that the vehicle needs to counteract in order to move forward. One is air resistance, and air resistance is the largest component. And so the formula for air resistance is this. So we'll blow it up here. So the formula for air resistance is force of air resistance is 1/2 the density of the air, the drag coefficient. So you multiply 1/2 times the density of the air times the drag coefficient times the frontal area, and then multiply it times the velocity squared. Okay, so that is the formula for air resistance. The other thing that the vehicle needs to overcome is rolling resistance. So rolling resistance, the formula is force of rolling resistance is the coefficient of rolling resistance, and then the mass times the acceleration of gravity. So the acceleration of gravity is constant for everyone on Earth. It's 9.81 meters per second squared. Then the mass in kilograms, and then you multiply that by the coefficient of resistance. And what determines that? What determines the things that, I mean, it's very, very complicated. There's lots of things that can go into it, but basically it's how much does the tire deform on the surface, and how rough the surface is, and how sticky the tire is, and how big the contact patch is. All right, so there's a pretty good article from Tire Buyer talking about low rolling resistance and what are the things that affect it. So tread design. Obviously, if you have big knobby tires like on off-road, like off-roading truck tires, they're going to have more rolling resistance, which is why when you see road tires, they have kind of a smoother tread. So yeah, like this kind of tire is going to have a lot more rolling resistance than this kind of tire. And if any of you are cyclists, you've noticed that road bikes have very smooth tread and mountain bikes have rough tread because it gives them more grip on rough terrain, but you would sacrifice rolling resistance. It's much harder to push that tire on a smooth road. Okay, tire tread compound. So how sticky is the compound? So if you go back and look at this, what is the thing that has the least coefficient of rolling resistance? It's railroad steel wheels on steel rails, because basically neither the wheel is not going to deform at all because it's steel, and the track is very, very smooth. So you have rolling resistance coefficient of like 0.001. That's 10 times less than an automobile tire. Like automobile tire usually is about 0.01. But what do you sacrifice on that? Well, you'll have basically no grip. And if you had a car that has steel wheels, you'd have amazingly good rolling resistance, but you couldn't turn or stop very well or accelerate very well. So that would be bad. But so tire compound, they're stickier tires. So those of you guys who race cars or something, you know there's track tires that are really sticky, but they burn through really fast, and you won't get as good efficiency with those. The rolling resistance is pretty high on those. Stiff and sidewall. So the more that the tire squishes and deforms, that's energy that's being used to deform the wheel and bring it back. So stiffer wheels are going to give you better rolling resistance. And that's why if you air up your tires and give them a lot of tire pressure, that makes the tires stiffer, so they deform less, and they will give you better gas mileage or better efficiency. And then smaller tire footprint, contact patch. So if wider tires are going to give you worse rolling resistance because they have a larger contact patch. So therefore, if you have 3 skinny wheels, you can have much smaller contact patch than 4 bigger wheels. This is like if you, again, going back to a bicycle example, because these small differences become very obvious to you when you pedal a bike, because we just can't generate that much power, and you will notice these differences. Try riding a bike with a very skinny tire, and then try riding a bike with fat tires, and tell me which one is harder to push. The fat tire bike will be way harder to push. Also, think about a bicycle with 2 wheels versus like a velocycle with 3 wheels, like a trike. You'll notice that the resistance to the rolling resistance is much higher with 3 wheels than with 2 wheels. And if you add 4 wheels, it's even harder. The weight is the same. Even if you kept the weight constant, it'll be harder to push the vehicle with more wheels because it's more contact patch. And then weight reduction. So weight reduction obviously is one of the factors in the formula for calculating. So those are the 2 major things the vehicle has to fight against. And then the last thing is the efficiency of the drivetrain. So how efficient is the drivetrain at turning electrical energy into actual physical kinetic energy, physical propulsion, and how much drain is there from the other subsystems on the car. Like basically you have to use some energy to do the climate control, and you have to use some energy to do the battery management and the thermal management, and you have to use some energy to run the computers and stuff. So there's going to be some small amount of energy to do that stuff. But the biggest things is air resistance number 1, rolling resistance number 2, drivetrain efficiency, and other loads on the car number 3. Okay, so Curtis has put together this spreadsheet that takes into account all these things. So you look at weight. So here it is. You're looking at so you need to know, remember for the air resistance, you need to know velocity. So here's velocity. You need to know the weight of the vehicle. So he's saying like, here's the base weight, battery weight, driver weight. And you can change when you make a copy, just change all these numbers however you like. And so this is the estimated weight of the Aptera, about 2,000 pounds. And that is the best information that we know. We don't know the exact weight of the Aptera yet, but we've been told it's roughly about this weight, about 1,800 pounds without a driver. We know the weight of the Model 3 standard range, and that's pretty good. So it's about double the weight, okay? And then gravitational constant, obviously the same for everyone. Coefficient of road resistance, less with the Aptera because it has 3 wheels, skinnier tires. But I mean, not that big of a difference. It goes from 11 to 8, so not a big difference. And then frontal area. This is the frontal area actually of the Aptera and the Model 3 are very similar. 23.7 and 23.9, which frontal areas become very, very similar when you convert it to meters squared. Then coefficient of drag, it's 0.13 for the Aptera, 0.23 for the Model 3. We know the Model 3 coefficient of drag is 0.3. That's like known. Aptera this is what we're being told by Aptera is their coefficient of drag. That's very likely to be true because it's based off the Morelli shape. And if someone wants to know, Aptera has released their actual STL file of their 3D model. And if you know fluid dynamics, you can model it yourself and get a coefficient of drag. And remember, an actual model of the original Aptera back from the early 2000s was tested by a NASA in an actual air tunnel, and it was found to be the most aerodynamic car that they've ever tested by a wide margin. So this there's no reason to seriously doubt this number. Maybe it's a little different. Maybe it's 0.135, 132. Who knows? But it's not going to be. It's definitely going to be far better than this. And this is already a very good coefficient of drag. Okay, and then this is power loss. This is how much drain that you expect the computers, the battery management, air climate control and stuff to take. And so you can change this. Like in this, Curtis has it set that the Tesla is using 350 watts and Aptera is using 200 watts because Aptera has a smaller cabin and less overhead in those ways. And Tesla has a lot of fancy software and stuff, and so they're probably going to eat up more power. But you can change this to other numbers and see what it does to your theoretical range. And then we know how much usable battery that we expect them to have, because we know it's a 45 kilowatt hour battery. Okay, so at these things, you see like the different vehicle speeds at 20 miles per hour, 60 miles per 100 miles per hour. You can expect ranges of 800, 430, 206 miles. That's the range. And then on the standard range Tesla, 400, 250, 130 miles at these different speeds. So you see how speed makes a huge difference on that. Okay, so let's go look at this and let's look at some of these assumptions that are being made. So half the curb weight, let's assume equal motor efficiency and battery management with Tesla. Okay, I mean reasonable assumption. Like I think electric motors are pretty we know pretty much how accurate they are. There's not huge differences. All electrical motors are upwards of 95% efficient. And then, so that's not going to change much. The curb weight increases efficiency by roughly 10%. Okay, I don't even know where people are getting these numbers from. I think they're just pulling them out of the air. Let's look at what happens. Okay, let's look at the Model 3. Let's assume, see what happens if, so the range is 250. Currently at its current weight. Now let's decrease the weight by half. So we'll decrease it by 2,000. So it's 1875. Okay, so it decreases by 2,000, and look at that. It goes from 250 to 330. That is not 10%. That's like almost 50%. It's like, I don't know, but it went up by 80 miles. So that's, I guess, 30%, 33%, something about like that, okay? So it's definitely not 10%. It's way more than 10%. It's like 30 to 40%. All right, then this is the biggest issue here. Aptera is much wider than a Model 3. True, yes. Almost as wide as a Cybertruck. So he's saying that the frontal area of the Aptera is 3.11 square meters and 2.66 for the Model 3. Okay, so wrong on both counts. The frontal area of a Model 3 is actually 2.22 meters. Okay, and if you go to Drew's thing, he had a really ingenious way of figuring it out. He just like overlaid the frontal silhouette and changed the colors, and then had the computer count the percentage of colors, and then turned into a rectangular box and figured out the frontal area. And let's see if I can remember what his frontal area he calculated with. Okay, so he goes up. Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, so he calculates a frontal area of 21.12. 21.12. So 21 square feet. So that's actually a little less than what we noticed. We know pretty well what the frontal area is. So if you calculate a frontal area of 20, so it's actually, he calculated 21, that would make it let's see, let's put it in here. So he calculated like 21.6. That would make a frontal area of 2 meters squared. The actual number is 23.7. It's actually 2.2 meters squared. Okay, which is obviously way different than 3.1. It's like 1/3 the frontal area that this back of the napkin math is calculating. How do we know what the frontal area is? Well, Aptera released its actual 1/4 scale official model on Thingiverse. And so you can download this STL file, you scale it up 48 times, and then you know exactly what the frontal area is. There is this program called Perea, which will calculate the frontal area. So most lift and drag actions require the use of frontal and project area. So this is a software package. You feed it in STL files, and it'll tell you what the frontal area is. So Bennett in our Discord channel, he used Perea. So here it is. Here's the STL file. He used Perea, had it calculate the frontal area, and calculate the frontal area is 959. Then you multiply it by 48 twice because it is a square, and it's 1/48 scale. And then you multiply it by 1,000 twice, and to get meters squared. So then you get 2.209 meters squared. So that is the actual best information we have. It's Aptera's official file. So that's very close to what Drew got. So Drew got 21.7. The actual is 23.7. So in terms of frontal area, it's almost exactly the same as a Model 3. Model 3 is 23.9. Frontal area of the Aptera is 23.7 because it is wider, but it doesn't use, there's not as much frontal area because it's wide because of those wheel pants that are out there. All right, so this is just like so wrong. It's so off. And so he says that the total drag is 2/3 of a Model 3, and that improves overall efficiency by 10%. No, wrong again. You can see what doing that will do. Like what will happen if you decrease air resistance. So the air resistance force is obviously way better than his calculation because he calculated it based on a frontal area that is much larger than reality. But even if you were right about that, if the total drag is 2/3, it does not improve efficiency by 10%. Okay, we will see. Let's go back to the Model 3 again. Let's say that this frontal area is, so the easy way to make it 2/3 is to just decrease this by 2/3. So we're gonna decrease this by 2/3 times 2 divided by 3. Okay, so this is 15. So 16, all right. So let's see what happens when we change this from 23.9 to 16. So range currently 327. Okay, wait a sec. I need to change the rolling resistance back. Okay, let's change this weight back to what it was. 3875. Okay, so we're back to normal. So 251. And then we're going to change this to 16. 251. So that changed it by 20%. Not 10%, 20%. Now, what we do know is that the frontal area is completely off. 3.9. And so you see how when you take into account the rolling resistance and the actual correct frontal area, you can see that the prediction is very close to correct. You see that the watt hours per mile is twice as good as the Model 3. So this is 207 watt hours per mile, and Aptera is 97 watt hours per mile. Remember, Aptera has always been saying about 100 watt hours per mile. And so that's what we get. And that's with these assumptions, which are as accurate as we can get it. Now, there is another website called, let's see, here we go. It's called Motor Matchup. This is a pretty fun website. You can like do drag racing and range estimations of all kinds of things. So he's using this as the driving weight, 1924, which is very close to the weight that we're saying, 1947. So very, very close. And then he's using a coefficient drag of 0.13, which is what's always been said. And he's using a frontal area of 2.3, which is a little higher, but that's a very good estimate too. Remember, the actual frontal area is 2.2. And then he's using a coefficient of resistance of 0.0075. Okay, which is very close to the estimate that we're using, which is 0.0085. Okay, and so if you do that, you can look at what is the efficiency at these various speeds. And so he's calculating 105. So we calculated 97, he's calculating 105. Very close. And so this is actually an engineer that's doing this. This is actually an engineer that's doing this, not an engineer doing this. And then this is the actual formula. So you can double check the spreadsheet if you like, but these are the actual formulas that that Curtis used in this formula. And you can see that motor matchup, you get very similar things. And if you look at, let's look at Tesla Model 3. Okay, sure, we'll go 2024 and long range. Go. And so you see here, so he uses this, he's going to give them the same rolling resistance, but you can still see that Aptera doubles the watt hours per mile, or halves it. It's more efficient. It's twice as efficient because it uses about 100. Okay, so basically, I know that was a little mathy, and if you like an explanation with less math and just better presented, go to Drew's video. This is a little more mathy. And if you want to play with it yourself, please download this pretty cool spreadsheet made by Curtis. And in case you want to thank Curtis for making this spreadsheet, I've put his Aptera referral code. So if you decide to order an Aptera, use his code, get him a referral credit, and you can thank him that way. Okay, so thanks for watching, guys. I hope that was helpful. And hope you had a great day.